everybody. I'm so excited to have on my guest today. Uh, you know, in today's mail, I received an early holiday package from today's generous special guest. Brian Propp was kind enough to accept my invitation to be a guest on my radio show several years ago. And he didn't forget me. Today he's on our Super Sports Collection Show. Brian is a former. It's going to take me a while to get through this, Brian. So
No problem.
Give me a couple of minutes because your life is a highlight reel. He's a former professional ice hockey player who played left wing. Could you imagine playing 15 seasons in the National Hockey League? And from 1979 to 1994, he played in and was a major contributor in 5 Stanley Cup finals with 3 different NHL teams and won the 1987 Canada Cup with Team Canada. He mostly played for the feared Philadephia Flyers, and I want to ask him about that today because I was a New Yorker. I was like the Brad Park guys and Ed Jockerman guys, and that was a vicious rivalry with the Philadephia Flyers. He also played a year or so for the Bruins, the North Stars, and the Whalers, but from 79 to 90 with the Philadephia Flyers. And Brian, you scored over 40 goals in a year 4 times. And 4 times you scored, over 80 points with assists. Surprisingly, and I want to ask you about this, 110, 117 penalty minutes. And 1 year before he made the NHL, 200 penalty minutes in 1 year. 81 to 89 were gold for you. Great years, career years. Listen, I can go on forever, but I want to welcome my very special guest, Brian Propp. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, how you doing today? It's good to talk to you.
So I hope that, all those things I said about you, every one of those things were very much your career. But one of the things that really piqued my interest, you look like a typical guy, straightforward, manners. You had to have had all this going for you to have been in a hockey professional. But one of the things that caught my eye was 200 penalty minutes before you got to the Flyers. You were a bit of a maniac back then, weren't you?
Yeah, a little bit, but we had good teams, and I know, I grew up in Saskatchewan, Canada. My dad was a Lutheran minister, so I don't know where I got that from, but I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. We're all 13 months apart, and we only had a town of 300 people, so we needed as many people as you can just to get teams together. So we started skating on the ponds when it got cold, and when it's froze in the rinks downstairs in December, then we could go inside because it's in Saskatchewan, it's minus 30 below January and February. So you have to dress warmly. But I started when I was 16 playing for the Melville Millionaires. So I tell people that I was a millionaire once. And so because I had not after that. And then I had 3 years in Brandon where we had powerful teams and we had tough teams. And then that year, we had a lot of tough players, and then just sort of like the Flyers have in the 80s. And then so that's why I was a tough guy, but maybe I got a couple misconducts with that in those times. But yeah, it was really good for me at the start just to play with a tough team, and then we went to the Flyers in 79-80. We went to the finals my first year. We had a 35 undefeated streak. And so, as you're talking about cards, I collect cards later, and so I've been collecting my rookie cards and the streak cards and things like that. And I have a bunch of nieces and now nephews. So like I give them all the copies of all the cards that I have. But in the early 80s, there was only Topps and O-Pee-Chee, and then it got a little better, like in '88, and then they had all these other copies. But for me, it was just good to connect and collect, and I've got a good stick collection that I for guys that I played with that I got them signing, and then so there's a lot of things going on, and if people want to visit me, like if they want to go to millions.co, I have gear for hats, t-shirts, pucks, and hoodies. So if they want to check that out, and then I also have the brianpropp.com website too that they can check out too.
I'll definitely put that up there so people can find it without having too much trouble. So let me ask you, I always wonder about this. What was it like that when you first heard about that the Flyers were interested in you? Tell me about that process of when you first heard about it to getting on the ice with them.
So it was different in the '70s because I didn't follow hockey too much. I just played, but I thought at the end, like my last year in junior when I had 94 points, that I could get drafted. But I was working on the farm when I got drafted, and I just got a call from them because it's different now. Like you go to the arena and it's a big thing, but I didn't even know I got drafted, and so they had to call me when I go to the Flyers. But I was happy to go by the Flyers. I wanted to be a little earlier, but it ended up being better for me because I got to play with quality players like Bob Clark and Bill Barber and Leach and McLeish and all those players, and so and then I fit in really well with them at the start.
And tell me about your personal relationships with them, because I know the key to having great teams is chemistry between the players. It wasn't just skill and ability. Of course, it's important. Tell me about the special chemistry that you felt during those championship years.
Yeah, like in '79, '80, like we had a balanced four lines. We had tough players, and if we and the new goalie was Peters was a rookie, and I was a rookie too. And then before, like it was Kenny Linsman and Ben Wilson, so they were the young guys too. But Bob Clark knew how to lead, and then we had Pat Quinn as a coach, so he was a good coach. But he didn't have to tell us too much because we had great leaders. And we went to the final against the Islanders. It's number 1 against number 16. Then it changed into conference play, so it was a little different. But at that time, the quality of the players, and they knew their roles. So like I think most of the players of today's game, like they're faster, but the top two lines are the better players, and they get on the power play, and then you have the third and fourth line kind of rotate a little bit more. But it's all good for them if as long as they play with the role that they need. That's why we won so much in the Flyers.
Tell me about Bobby Clark more, because I really don't know anything about him other than he's a heck of a hockey player, and he was definitely one of the guys that made kind of headlines and highlight reels. Tell me about him.
Yeah, so like he played in Flin Flon, Manitoba, junior hockey, and along with Reggie Leach. But he's a diabetic, and so like he didn't get picked earlier in the draft because they were scared that he would be weak and things like that. But as it turned out, he was one of the best leaders in the world, and he had such drive that he was one of the best around, and he led by example. And he was a tough player and mean. But they had Dave Schultz and a couple other guys that were fighters, and so we kind of got protected. But he was mean. But I learned from him because we're both like in Western Hockey League, and we knew, hey, listen, no excuses. if you win, don't make excuses if you lose, and just keep playing ahead.
So there really were protectors like Dave Schultz on teams, uh, and I'm sure he knew his role. But what did you expect anything special from him as a enforcer?
Well, no, we had Ben Wilson at that time, and Dave Brown and Rick Tocchet, and so like like we had tough teams in the for the Rangers. It was a little bit scary for you guys because we had tough teams, and so we kind of beat you guys up a lot. But now the Rangers are fast, and they have a good team, and so they got into playoffs and almost won a Stanley Cup. But in the '80s, it was different. We had like the tougher players and good players and good coaching, and like Tim Kerr and Poulin and Clark and Barber, and then Holmgren and Linsman and Tocchet and Zezel, like so. But we fit in really well, and we at that time we didn't make that much money because the league was just one league, and so you took whatever you got. It wasn't that much, and like because my first 3 years I just lived on $1,000 a month a budget, so which was so different now. But we have better stories, and we hung out together, and we had fun, and we won together, and we knew our roles, and so that's why it was kind of special at that time, and that's why I've always been pretty good with taking pictures and events that I go to, and then when I meet people, I put their picture together with their contact information, and then also, I did the radio for 9 years for the Flyers from 2000 to 2009. So it was
Wow.
every home game and away. And so like I know all the alumni, and because we played in the same division, the Devils, the Rangers, and the Islanders, and I know a lot of those guys that are alumni because they still work for other teams. But we help each other with golf tournaments and some hockey events. So you get to meet a bunch of those other people. And then with me playing Team Canada in '87 and winning the Canada Cup. And I was one of the better players in the whole league in the '80s, and so of course, I got asked to Canada for special events that they had with other alumni. Like I went to Newfoundland and Nova Scotia and Toronto and Winnipeg, and so I kept playing a lot of hockey after I retired.
Wow. I mean, what a great story. So tell me about some of the relationships that you might have had with players when you were playing from other teams. Did you have friendly relationships with some of the other guys from other teams?
Well, the first 11 years, like we hated each other, like we played against each other. So like you go to a bar and then you wouldn't stay in the same bar as them because you hated them. But it's changed a lot now because now the other guys they talk all the time and they make so much money, and it's not that it's so different. But in the '80s, it was tough because you couldn't talk to the other guys, like you fought a lot of them. And so the '90s and 2000s kind of changed when they started making more money, but and the '90s were like a little the same, like but you kind of hated other people. But as they had more teams in the league, it makes a difference because there's so many other players and the other divisions that you have. You get to know your own division, but not so much the other ones, and so you don't really know what they're doing, and you just have to wait for the playoffs to see who you're going to play against. But most of these players in the '80s, and after you're an alumni, it becomes a little bit different because they're used to hanging out together and having a beer together and telling some other stories, and just by knowing and meeting all of those guys, it really made a difference for me. Just connecting with other people and trying to help each other.
Yeah, that sounds great. So were there you use the word hate, and I thought of that word, but I didn't use it at all. But I'm so interested that you did, because back then it was very, very different. Would you mind naming a couple of the other guys that you might have gotten into arguments, fights with, and that it was hard to let go and not have a rivalry with certain players?
Well, so I was a little different because when I got traded to Boston and after 11 years, and Dave Poulin was there too because I was injured that year. I had knee injury and a hand injury. So like and then so I played against the Flyers at the end of the
Ooh,
year, and but I treated them all the same. I said it's okay. I'm playing against you now, so I'm going to hit you. I'm going to do whatever I have to win. And now a lot of people wouldn't do that, but for me, like I was competitive and I wanted to win. So and I didn't fight that much. But the only person that I hate is Chris Chelian because in '89, like he elbowed me from behind in the playoffs. I was leading the scorer in the playoffs, and he hit me really high and on purpose, knocked me out, and I missed the game, and he never said anything about it. He was a dirty player, and so I didn't that's about the only guy that I don't like as much.
and nothing smoothed out over the years. It's just kind of
Uh,
stayed the same.
no, he sent a couple posts a couple of years ago saying, like it doesn't make sense because I didn't talk with him, and he sent a couple things that said, "Oh, Joe, just like the time I was in Flyer, I decapitated Brian Propp, and Hextall
Oh,
he beat him up." So
oh.
that was why did he have to say that? He didn't have to. Just because I know the kind of person he is. He's been good with the teammate that he was with, but he does his family list was different, and so you're good with your buddies, but I know what he's like.
Oh, I know when you first started, there weren't all these teams like we talked about. There's no expansion. Were there teams that you guys really got up for and always wanted to play your best? Was that really the way it was against certain teams?
Yeah, but especially the better teams, like in the division that we had the Rangers and Boston and Montreal were tough to play against. In the 80s, like Washington wasn't that strong, and the Devils weren't that strong. So but the Rangers and Boston and Montreal are top six teams, and so they know how to win and build character and have good teams. And so it's more better to be ready for them, those kinds of games.
So also when uh, you got traded, and I always wonder about this, you touched on it, but tell me about leaving the Flyers. That must have been really hard. What brought that on? Was it a money thing? Were you traded? Tell me a little bit about leaving the Flyers.
So as the end of my career contract, I was going to be a free agent, and so they knew that, and I got hurt. I missed 27 games with my hand injury, and so and then I just started at the end. But they changed a lot at the end of that time because they were looking to use younger players and trying to build a team around them. But the problem with that is that they didn't do a good job of that because Dave Poulin was traded to Boston that January, and I got traded in March, and Tim Kerr came after that, and then so like all the top players that were leaders and knew how to win, they kind of missed that, and so that's why the Flyers didn't make the playoffs 5 years after that, and then they got Lindros a couple years later, which he was a awesome player, but they needed to change something else like that.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about Lindros. I don't, again, I don't know a lot about a lot of things that went on in Philly. Do you know much about him and how he made a
Yeah, well,
difference?
so he was drafted by Quebec, number one all time, but he didn't go for the first year because his parents controlled most of his contract, and he just did what his parents told him to. So they did a deal with the Flyers. They were going to try to do a deal with the Rangers, but the Flyers, did a better deal. And so like Lindros was a powerful player at that time, big and strong, and but he was a great player, but he was young, and then he just kind of hung by himself. And then after a couple of years, he learned, like I did when I came into the NHL, like 3 or 4 years after I started. I learned how to be more likable and talk about the press and be more friendly with that. So, but he's done a great job. Now he's got 3 kids, and they're a little older now. So as you mature, you keep doing well. But then, unfortunately for him, he had too many concussions.
Mm. He's suffering with that now.
I think most of them still are, like a guy like a Chris Pronger and Chris Pruma, Scott Stevens, like all these players that hit so much and got concussions. Like it depends on what kind of concussion they have. Like there's 2 different kinds of concussions. There's one that you can kind of live with it and then just have balance problem and memory loss. But then there's the dizzy and getting sick. That's what those guys had. So you couldn't shook it. So it was really tough for those guys that they had to retire.
And also, speaking of retirement, you had that injury, you get traded, you have to go to a brand new team. And I guess, listen, you're competitive, like you said. You'll play it all the way to the hilt with a new team, even against the Flyers. But tell me about what it was like towards the very end when you realized that perhaps either you didn't want to go on or you couldn't go on.
Yeah, so like that was when I was like Bob Clark got fired in '90 when he traded me to Boston, and then he got hired as a GM of Minnesota. So he brought me and Bob Smith to Minnesota because like they needed a couple leaders, and so we had a good run. Like we went into the Stanley Cup Finals in against Minnesota, and then a couple years later, then as a couple of injuries, and then like I had a dislocated shoulder, and then I ended up with Hartford at the end, like as a free agent, and I just signed as a free agent for that. But I didn't get as much ice time at that time, so just like third or fourth line. But I knew my role, and so like I just played killed penalty shots, and I still got 29 points to get 1,000 points, which was good for me. And then I ended up playing a year in France after that. But yeah, so I knew at the end, like it was tougher to work out, and the injuries over the years kind of took tour. But I was always happy with everything, and just did whatever I had to make sure that I could be a help with winning the teams.
And people wonder when a successful player who's played 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, 12 years, when they have to leave the sport, it pretty much must be devastating to go from being so in the spotlight and being seen by tens of thousands of people each night to not be. What did you do that, and what would you suggest other players do that have that situation? What do they do?
So I think that like I didn't want to be a coach, and so I built the Medford ice rink in New Jersey, an ice rink. It took a year to get it all set up, and I ran all the programs for that for 3 years. And then I kept looking around, and I ended up getting the job with the Flyers on the radio, every home game and an away game with Tim Saunders. And so I did that for 9 years, and then, but I was always consulting with other things. Like I had my AFLAC license. I got my financial licensing, I always had lots of things going on. And now I'm a realtor and Wolf Commercial Real Estate in New Jersey, and I do that, and and now I can do some solar consulting, because you just always have to do other things. There's lots of ways to figure out what you need to do. Most of the guys that retire in hockey, like, just want to be a coach or a scout, but it's not, that wasn't for me, because I started my family after I retired. And so I wanted to spend time with them, which I did. And I spent more time with that. But there's so many opportunities to work. Even if you played 3 or 4 years, you should use that brand that you have and work hard. And because a lot of athletes that they'd like to hire.
That's super interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you go to signings? Do you go? How can people get to you? Can they meet you at signings, card signings, events? Do you do those?
Yeah. So, like, if they can go on to my brianpropp.com website, there's a way that they can answer questions, like, I have my number on, and then if they can ask when it is, or and how much it is, and then I'll tell them, because like this Saturday, I'm for in doing an appearance for freehold racing in New Jersey, and with Peter Grandage. He's a financial guy that he knew a lot of football players in New York, and so I just met him, and because, like, the Devils that are there, and Joe Clocco that just got in the Hall of Fame. He's good friends of them, and Adam Burt, like a former hockey guy. So, like, we connect with them, and we help each other. And I have my own celebrity hockey event in April in Iceworks, which is in PA, in April, and then I have my own golf tournament for the Stroke Center of University of Pennsylvania that I can really help people with in May 13th this year in New Jersey too, Ron Jaworski's golf course.
That's really spectacular. I don't know. Sometimes you can't see these things. There you go. You
Yeah,
sent
yeah.
me these autographed. They're all autographed, and I'm gonna give one away to the first 10 people that contact me after watching this show. Autographed, beautiful pictures of you playing the sport that you love. Brian, I want to thank you so much. You were kind enough to do my radio show several years ago, and you're such a gentleman to accept my invitation again. Not, what surprises me is not all the athletes are even willing to do stuff like this. I didn't realize that they would either be so busy or private, but I think it's great that you come out into the world and let people know what a great guy you are. And I really, really appreciate you doing the show.
Yeah. So, just so that like, I had a massive stroke 8 years ago, where I couldn't talk or walk.
Oh,
And so, like, my wife that I have, we just have a franchise called Prime IV Wellness and Hydration in Marlton, New Jersey. We just opened that. There's 100 franchises like that are doing that, and it'll be a bunch in PA and New York soon. But I just did a treatment like last week. It was like 4 hours every day, 4 days, and it's NAD. So it took a long time, but I really noticed a big difference because my fingers are working much better than I used to just be straight out. And so, but now I can, and in my right side, it works much better. And I'm speaking without hesitating again, because I have aphasia, and so the words don't come out the same way. So what I've done is I noticed a big difference with that. So after the first four times, then it's every 3 months, and then I'll just do a drip for like 3 or 4 hours, and then it really helps with the cells in your body as you're getting older.
I'll definitely put that information up for everyone to see. And you're doing great, because I didn't notice a problem at all. So you've come a long way. If you've
Well,
come,
you must be an old hockey guy. Yeah.
I used to play, you mentioned the ice rinks in the neighborhood and the rivers that used to freeze up. That, people say, what sport do you love? I love baseball. but boy, did I love playing ice hockey on those lakes and those streams. I would play until it was dark. I
Oh yeah,
loved it. I
yeah,
loved
yeah.
it.
That's awesome.
And I have so much respect for you. Thank you again for doing this show, Brian Propp. What a gentleman. What a good guy. And I appreciate you keeping in touch with me. Thank you so much for your time. And I wish you all the best in the future. And of course, a happy holidays and a happy new year coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce.
Bye-bye, everybody. What a special show. We'll see you all again here on the Super Sport Collection Show. My name is Bruce Starr. Brian Propp. Great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.